You ever heard a story that makes you stop dead in your tracks, shake your head, and think, oh no, she didn't? Well, buckle up, because what started as one black man simply taking pride in his home turned into a war with his homeowners association. And one very nosy, very entitled neighbor we'll call Karen. And let me warn you, this battle didn't end with words. It ended with a wall, a literal wall. It was a sunny Saturday morning in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Atlanta. Birds were chirping, kids were riding bikes up and down the cul-de-sac, and the smell of freshly cut grass lingered in the air. Malik Johnson, 42 years old, stood out front of his home with pruning shears in hand. He loved mornings like this, crisp, calm, the world not yet buzzing with noise. His hedges, thick, green, perfectly lined, were his pride. He had planted them 10 years ago, right after he bought the house. They weren't just plants to him. They were a symbol, a line of dignity, privacy, and care for the home he had worked so hard to afford. See, Malik wasn't just some guy with a nice yard. He was a single father raising his teenage daughter, Kayla. He worked as an electrician, long hours, hard labor, hands calloused, back sore. But when he came home, tending to his yard gave him peace. Those hedges represented stability, something Kayla could come home to and feel safe behind. But not everyone saw it that way. Next door lived Karen Whitfield, a 50-something suburban queen bee with a sharp tongue and an even sharper obsession with rules. The kind of woman who treated HOA guidelines like they were the 10 Commandments. She had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years and acted like she owned not just her property, but everyone else's too. And the second she laid eyes on Malik's hedges, she decided she didn't like them. The first sign of trouble was small. Malik found a note taped to his door. It read, Pro rules. Hedges must not exceed 3 feet. Yours are in violation. Please trim them down immediately. No signature, just a scribble at the bottom. HOA Compliance Committee. Malik sighed when he read it. He measured his hedges. They were 3 feet, maybe 3.5 at most. Not towering, not wild, just healthy. He figured it was a mistake, so he ignored it. But then, the following week, another note. This time, harsher. Failure to comply will result in fines. That one rubbed him the wrong way. See, Malik knew the rules. He had read the whole handbook front to back when he moved in. His hedges weren't out of compliance. They weren't blocking sidewalks. They weren't damaging property. This wasn't about rules. This was about control. The breaking point came one afternoon when Malik returned home from work to find Kayla standing in the driveway, her arms folded, eyes red from crying. Daddy, she said, her voice trembling. They cut them. They cut down your hedges. Malik's heart sank. He dropped his tool bag and rushed to the front yard. What he saw made his chest tighten. The hedges he had nurtured for a decade were butchered, not trimmed, not pruned, slashed. Branches hacked unevenly, leaves scattered across the lawn like confetti after a storm. His sanctuary was gone, and standing smugly next door, arms crossed, lips pursed in satisfaction, was Karen. HOA regulations, she called over, not even bothering to hide her smirk. I told you they were too high. You should be thanking me. Now let me pause here. Imagine this happening to you. Something you built with your own 2 hands. Something that wasn't just decoration, but part of your home, your peace, your identity, destroyed without your permission. And then, to have someone gloat about it? Malik's blood boiled. His fists clenched. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't afford to lose control. Not here. Not in front of Kayla. He took a deep breath, swallowed his rage, and simply said, You made a mistake. Karen tilted her head and gave him that smug, condescending smile. No, sweetie. You made the mistake. And with that, she turned and walked back into her house like she had won. But oh, she had no idea. Malik wasn't just going to let this slide. He wasn't going to file a complaint and hope the HOA would magically do the right thing. No, he was about to teach Karen a lesson she would never forget. Because if she didn't like Hedges, then she was really going to hate what came next. And that's where our story truly begins. A man stripped of his peace, a neighbor drunk on power, and a war that would turn this quiet little neighborhood upside down. What Karen didn't know was that Malik was about to fight back in the boldest way possible. But before we get to the wall, yes, the actual cinder block wall, you need to understand how deep this feud ran. Because this wasn't just about plants. This was about respect, about dignity, about one black man refusing to be walked over. And trust me, this fight was just getting started. The night after his hedges were destroyed, Malik sat at his kitchen table, staring at the mess outside his front window. A soft lamp glowed above him, but the house felt dim. His daughter Kayla sat across from him, silent, pushing cold macaroni around her plate with a fork. Neither of them had much of an appetite. Malik leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. The anger was still there, hot and tight in his chest. But underneath it was something heavier. Disappointment. Not just disappointment in Karen. He already knew what kind of neighbor she was. The whole block knew. She was the type to report people for parking an inch too close to the curb. The type to call animal control on someone's dog for barking. No, what stung was the HOA. The very committee that was supposed to protect homeowners had backed her. Or at least, turned a blind eye when she crossed the line. He thought about all the sacrifices he had made to buy this house. Long nights rewiring buildings. Weekends spent doing side jobs just to make ends meet. The calluses on his palms were proof of the work he put in. He wasn't rich, but he had earned this. And now, someone thought they could just take it from him. Kayla finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "Daddy, why does she hate us?" Malik's heart cracked. She was only 15, but she wasn't blind. She noticed how Karen never waved at them, how she scowled when Kayla's friends came over, how her smile seemed reserved for the white families on the block. Malik leaned forward, his voice steady but full of emotion. "She doesn't hate us, baby girl. She hates what we represent. Independence, strength, the fact that we don't bow down when she tells us to." Kayla frowned. "But that's not fair." "No," Malik said firmly. "It's not. But life isn't always fair. What matters is how we respond." The very next morning, Malik decided to get answers. He wasn't about to sit around and stew in silence. He walked straight to the HOA office, a little beige building at the edge of the neighborhood. The lobby smelled of lemon cleaner and cheap coffee. Behind the counter sat a young woman in a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on the chest. "Yes, can I help you?" she asked politely. Malik placed the crumpled violation notice on the desk. "Yeah, you can explain this. And tell me who gave my neighbor the authority to hack down my hedges." The receptionist's smile faltered. She glanced at the paper, then back at him. "I'll, let Mr. Sanderson know you're here." Within minutes, the HOA president himself appeared. Middle-aged, balding, glasses perched on his nose. He carried himself with that self-important swagger Malik knew all too well. "Mr. Johnson," Sanderson said, forcing a smile. "What seems to be the issue?" Malik held up the notice. "The issue is my neighbor trespassed on my property and destroyed my hedges. And she did it under your authority. So I want to know, who gave the order?" Sanderson adjusted his glasses, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, technically, Mrs. Whitfield is part of our compliance subcommittee. She had the right to enforce." "Enforce?" Malik cut him off. "She vandalized my property. That's not enforcement. That's destruction. And it's illegal." Sanderson's smile tightened into a thin line. "There's no need to get hostile. The rules state hedges can't exceed 3 feet. They didn't exceed 3 feet. And even if they did, you send a warning. You don't send my neighbor into my yard with garden shears like some vigilante." For a moment, the room went quiet. The receptionist looked away, pretending to type something on her computer. Finally, Sanderson cleared his throat. "Well, perhaps we can consider this matter resolved then. The hedges are already trimmed. So, resolved?" Malik repeated, his voice rising. "This isn't resolved. This is just the beginning. If the hoe won't protect my property, then I will. Sanderson's jaw tightened. He didn't like being challenged. But Malik didn't stick around for a response. He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving the door swinging behind him. By the time Malik got home, Karen was outside, watering her flowers like nothing had happened. She spotted him and smirked. Looks better already, don't you think? Malik stopped on the sidewalk, just a few feet from her. He looked her dead in the eye, his voice calm but ice cold. You crossed the line. Don't ever step on my property again. Karen chuckled, twirling the hose in her hand. Or what? You'll call the hoe? Good luck with that, sweetie. They're on my side. That word again. Sweetie, dripping with mockery. Malik stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. No, I don't need the hoe. You'll see exactly what I mean soon enough. For the first time, Karen's smile faltered, just for a split second. But then she laughed it off and turned back to her roses. Malik walked inside, his mind racing. He knew one thing for certain. She thought she had power over him. She thought she could bully him into submission. But she had no idea who she was messing with. That night, Malik sat down with a notebook. He started sketching. Lines, measurements, materials. Not Hedges this time. Something stronger. Something permanent. If Karen wanted a fight, she was about to get one. Because Malik was done playing defense. The next week, a low rumble echoed down the quiet cul-de-sac. It was Saturday morning again. But instead of Malik trimming hedges, a delivery truck was backing into his driveway. Neighbors peeked out of blinds, curious. A few even stepped onto their porches, coffee mugs in hand. One by one, the driver unloaded stacks of heavy gray blocks, cinder blocks, piled high on wooden pallets. Alongside them came bags of cement mix, steel rebar, and buckets of mortar. And right behind the truck was Malik, wearing work boots, jeans, and a determined expression. Kayla stood at the edge of the driveway, watching in awe. Daddy, what are you doing? She asked. Malik wiped sweat from his brow and gave her a small smile. Building something that can't be cut down. She tilted her head, confused. You mean, like a wall? Exactly, Malik said, his voice firm. If she doesn't respect boundaries, then I'll make one she can't ignore. Within hours, the cul-de-sac buzzed with whispers. Kids abandoned their bikes to watch. Adults crossed their arms, murmuring to each other. And of course, Karen noticed. The moment she saw those first cinder blocks lined up along the property line, she stormed across the lawn, her sandals slapping against the sidewalk. Excuse me, she snapped, waving her arms. What on earth do you think you're doing? Malik didn't look up. He was already mixing cement in a wheelbarrow, the shovel clinking against the metal. Building, he said flatly. Karen's mouth fell open. Building? Building what? This is against HOA rules. You can't just put up some ugly prison wall in the middle of our neighborhood. Malik finally raised his head. Sweat glistened on his forehead, but his eyes were steady. You had a problem with Hedges, so now you'll get a wall. My property, my right, Karen scoffed. We'll see about that. She spun on her heel and marched back to her house, phone already pressed to her ear. By the next day, the HOA was involved. Malik found a formal letter taped to his door, printed in bold black ink. Notice of unapproved structure, or HOA bylaws. All permanent structures require prior approval. Immediate cease and desist is required. Malik crumpled the letter and tossed it aside. He wasn't stopping. Brick by brick, row by row, the wall rose higher, his muscles ached. His hands blistered. But each block he laid down felt like a victory, a statement. And soon, others started noticing too. Mr. Williams from down the street strolled over, nodding approvingly. Looks solid, brother. Real solid, he said. About time someone stood up to her. Even a few younger neighbors offered to help, hauling buckets of mortar and passing cinder blocks. For the first time, Malik realized he wasn't alone. But not everyone was supportive. On the third day, As Malik was smoothing mortar across the top row, a black SUV rolled up. Out stepped Sanderson, the whole president, flanked by two committee members in polo shirts. They walked straight up to Malik's driveway like a posse. "Mr. Johnson," Sanderson began, voice dripping with authority, "this wall is unauthorized. It must come down immediately." Malik wiped his hands on a rag, then leaned casually on his shovel. "Funny, I don't recall anyone asking my permission before tearing down my hedges." Sanderson's lips tightened. "That's different. Mrs. Whitfield was acting in accordance with compliance policy." Malik raised an eyebrow. "So trespassing on my land is compliance, but me protecting my land is a violation?" The committee members shifted uncomfortably. Sanderson adjusted his glasses. "You're making this harder than it has to be. Tear it down, or we'll fine you." Malik's voice dropped low, steady as steel. "Fine me then, but this wall stays." The standoff hung in the air, thick with tension. Finally, Sanderson huffed and turned away, muttering something about escalating to legal. But Malik didn't flinch. He kept building. That night, as the crickets chirped outside, Malik sat on his porch with Kayla. The wall now stood chest high, casting a shadow across the lawn in the moonlight. "Daddy," she whispered, "what if they take you to court?" Malik sighed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Then we fight in court. But I'm not letting anyone push us around. Not anymore." Kayla leaned against him, quiet for a moment. Then she smiled faintly. "I kinda like the wall. Makes me feel safer." Malik kissed the top of her head. "That's the point, baby girl. Safe and strong." Meanwhile, Karen wasn't done. From her window, she glared at the growing wall like it was a personal insult. And to her, it was. The more it rose, the less power she felt she had. So she started scheming. Late-night phone calls to the HOA board, emails to county zoning officials, even complaints to local police, claiming the wall was an eyesore and a safety hazard. But nothing stopped Malik. He rose each morning before dawn, working until his back screamed, stacking block after block. His determination became legendary on the block. And the wall? It was nearly complete. One evening, as Malik placed the final block at the top, the entire neighborhood seemed to be watching. Some clapped quietly. Others whispered in awe. Karen stood at the edge of her lawn, fuming, her face red. Finally, she couldn't hold it in anymore. "You'll regret this," she shouted across the yard. "Mark my words, you'll regret it." Malik looked at her, calm and unshaken. "No, Karen. The only thing I regret is thinking Hedges would be enough." The wall stood tall now, solid, unmovable. A new boundary line that changed the neighborhood forever. But Karen wasn't going to let it end there. And Malik knew. The real battle was only beginning. The wall was finished. It stood tall and proud, a fortress of gray stone against the line that separated Malik's yard from Karen's. For Malik, it wasn't just concrete and mortar. It was justice. Every block was a reminder that he wasn't powerless, that he could draw the line, literally and figuratively, against anyone who tried to disrespect him. But for Karen, it was humiliation. She stood at her window for hours, staring at that wall like it was mocking her. Every time she looked outside, it was there, blocking her view, blocking her sense of control. And worst of all, the neighborhood was talking. Whispers spread at barbecues, over morning jogs, even in the home meetings. "Did you see what Malik built? Honestly, I respect him. Man stood his ground. About time someone put Karen in her place." The more people admired Malik's defiance, the more furious Karen became. And then she made a decision. If she couldn't beat him with whole letters or fines, she'd beat him another way. It was a Tuesday evening when Malik's doorbell rang. He opened it to find two police officers standing on his porch. The red and blue lights from their cruiser flashed across the street. Kayla peeked nervously from behind the doorframe. "Mr. Johnson?" the taller officer asked. "Yes, that's me. We received a report of an unpermitted structure causing a safety hazard. We need to ask you a few questions." Malik felt his jaw tighten. He already knew where this was coming from. Let me guess. Karen called you. The officers exchanged a quick glance. We can't disclose who filed the complaint. But sir, if this wall isn't up to county code, you could be looking at fines. Possibly even an order to demolish it. Kayla's voice wavered from behind him. Daddy, they can't take it down, can they? Malik placed a steady hand on her shoulder. No one's taking anything down. Then he turned back to the officers. The wall is on my property, and it's not violating any laws. I checked county regulations before I started. The officers looked slightly surprised. Most people folded under pressure. Malik didn't. All right, the shorter officer said after a pause. We'll file our report, but expect a follow-up inspection. When they left, Malik closed the door slowly, exhaling. Kayla looked up at him with wide, worried eyes. They're not gonna tear it down, right? Malik crouched to meet her gaze. Baby girl, I did everything by the book. They can try, but we're ready. The very next day, Malik received a letter from the county zoning office. Karen had officially reported the wall. An inspector would be coming out to evaluate. This wasn't just petty now. This was legal. Malik knew Karen wanted one thing: to break him. To make the process so stressful, so overwhelming, that he'd finally cave. But Malik wasn't built that way. He stayed up late that night at the dining table. Paperwork spread around him. Zoning ordinances, HOA bylaws, county codes. His electrician's mind was methodical, precise. He studied every line, every clause. By 2 a.m., he had built not just a wall of stone outside, but a wall of evidence on paper. Kayla came downstairs, sleepy-eyed, and found him surrounded by documents. Daddy, she mumbled, why are you still up? Malik smiled faintly. Because, baby girl, Karen's playing checkers, but I'm playing chess. A week later, the inspector arrived, clipboard in hand, hard hat on. Karen watched from her porch, practically salivating, as the man walked Malik's property line. She couldn't contain herself. See? I told you it's an eyesore. It's bringing down property values. It's a danger to children. The inspector looked at her, then back at Malik. Malik just stood tall, arms folded, calm as ever. After a long walk around and a few measurements, the inspector cleared his throat. Mr. Johnson, he said, your wall is within county code. Height, setback materials, all compliant. No violations. Karen's jaw dropped. What? That's impossible. The inspector raised a hand. Ma'am, I've been doing this for 15 years. There's nothing wrong with this wall. Malik gave a small, knowing smile. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you being thorough. The inspector nodded and left. Karen, meanwhile, looked like she might explode on the spot. That night, as Malik sat on the porch sipping sweet tea, Karen stormed over. This isn't over, she hissed. You might have tricked the county, but I'll find another way. I always do. Malik looked at her with calm defiance. Karen, let me explain something. You can cut down plants. You can file complaints. You can call the cops, the HOA, the county, whoever you want. But what you can't do is break me. That wall out there, that's not just stone. That's a message. And the message is this: I will not be bullied. For the first time, Karen had no comeback. She just stood there, trembling with rage, before finally storming back across the lawn. But Malik knew this wasn't the end. Karen had gone from notes to trespassing, to dragging the county into it. What came next? He couldn't predict, but he could feel it in his bones. The battle was far from over, and the next move would be hers. The wall stood firm. The inspector had cleared it. Malik thought, just maybe, things would quiet down. But if he knew anything about Karen, it was this: she couldn't stand losing. And in her mind, she hadn't just lost to Malik. She had lost in front of the entire neighborhood. 2 days later, flyers appeared in every mailbox. Cheap paper, black and white print, but the headline was bold: Stop the wall, save our neighborhood. Malik picked one up off his porch. The words beneath dripped with venom. This unsightly cinder block wall is destroying the character of our community. If we allow one man to break the rules, what's next? Junkyards? Barbed wire? This wall is an eyesore and a threat to property values. Join us in demanding its removal at the next HOA meeting. At the bottom was Karen's name. Malik chuckled bitterly. She wasn't even hiding anymore. Kayla read over his shoulder, her face tightening. She's turning everyone against you. Malik shook his head. Not everyone. People know the truth, and now it's time to show them. That evening, Malik walked door to door. Not begging, not apologizing, just talking. He knocked on Mr. Williams' house. The older man opened the door, nodding. Brother, I've been waiting for you. You've got my support. Next, he stopped by a young couple's home down the block. They admitted Karen had been hounding them too, about paint colors, about their kids leaving toys in the yard. She's a nightmare, the wife whispered. We'll back you. By the end of the night, Malik realized something powerful. Karen wasn't feared anymore. She was resented. Her flyer campaign? It wasn't rallying the neighborhood. It was exposing her. But Karen wasn't backing down. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed. Folding chairs lined the walls, voices buzzing with anticipation. Malik sat near the front, Kayla by his side. Karen strutted in late, carrying a thick folder of evidence like she was preparing for a trial. Sanderson, the HOA president, banged the gavel. Order. Tonight we address the issue of Mr. Johnson's wall. Karen shot to her feet before he even finished. This wall is destroying our neighborhood, she cried. It's an eyesore. It's unsafe. And it's a violation of HOA spirit. Murmurs filled the room. Malik stayed calm, waiting. Karen flipped open her folder, pulling out photos of the wall. Look at this. Who wants to live next to a concrete bunker? It's like a prison yard. She turned to the crowd, her voice sharp. And if we let him get away with this, what's next? What's to stop someone from putting up a chain link fence topped with razor wire? We have rules for a reason. The room shifted. Some nodded, others frowned. Finally, Malik stood. His voice was steady, clear. You all know me. I've lived here 10 years. I keep my yard clean. I work hard. I raised my daughter here. I built that wall because someone destroyed what I had, not because I wanted to break rules, because I wanted peace. He paused, scanning the room. That wall isn't a prison. It's protection. It says, this is my home, and I won't let anyone violate it again. Then he held up the crumpled violation letters Karen had left on his door. And let's be honest, this isn't about community. This is about one person who thinks she's above everyone else. A ripple moved through the crowd. Whispers, nods, even a few quiet claps. Karen's face flushed red. You're twisting this. You're trying to play the victim. Malik locked eyes with her. I don't need to play the victim. Everyone here has seen how you treat people. For the first time, Karen looked unsettled, because in that room, for the first time, the balance of power had shifted. Neighbors spoke up. Karen fined us for leaving Christmas lights up in January. She threatened to report our teenager for playing basketball too late. She called animal control on our dog when it barked during the day. One by one, voices rose against her. Sanderson banged the gavel, trying to regain control. Order, order. But the damage was done. Karen's reputation wasn't just cracked, it was crumbling. When the meeting adjourned, Malik walked out to the parking lot with Kayla. A small group of neighbors followed, shaking his hand, patting him on the back. You did good in there, brother, one said. We've been waiting for someone to stand up to her, another added. Kayla beamed with pride. Daddy, you were amazing. Malik smiled, though his eyes were tired. This isn't over yet, baby girl, but we're not fighting alone anymore. Meanwhile, back in her car, Karen gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. The meeting was supposed to crush Malik. Instead, it had exposed her. Her eyes burned with rage as she whispered to herself, if the HOA won't handle him, I will. She didn't know how yet. But one thing was certain, Karen wasn't finished. And her next move? It wouldn't just be dirty, it would be dangerous. The night was quiet, too quiet. Malik sat on the porch, sipping tea, trying to unwind after the whole meeting. For the first time in weeks, he felt supported. His neighbors had spoken. Karen had been exposed. But peace never lasted long when Karen was involved. Across the street, her blinds twitched. She was watching him. Always watching. Malik exhaled, shaking his head. "Woman needs a hobby," he muttered, standing to go inside. He didn't see the figure moving down the side of his house. The first sign something was wrong came with the smell. Sharp, acrid, like gasoline. Then, whoosh, flames erupted along the side of Malik's garage, licking up the wood, exploding orange against the night sky. "Daddy!" Kayla's scream pierced the air. Malik's mug shattered on the porch. He bolted inside, scooping Kayla into his arms. Out! Out now! Neighbors burst from their homes as alarms blared. Someone shouted, "Call 911. Another grabbed a hose. But the fire was already raging, swallowing the wall, racing toward the roof. Malik coughed, eyes burning. He shoved Kayla into Mr. Williams' arms. "Take her. Don't let her come back." Then, without hesitation, he charged back toward the flames. Inside, heat seared his skin. He yanked open a drawer, grabbing the family photo album. His late wife's smile stared back at him from the cover. He tucked it under his arm, choking on smoke. A loud crack split the air as a beam collapsed, showering sparks across the living room. Malik staggered, his chest screaming for air. He stumbled toward the door. A strong arm caught him. "Got you!" It was his neighbor, Marcus, pulling him out just as the ceiling gave way behind them. They collapsed in the yard, coughing, gasping, but alive. The house, though, was gone. Kayla sobbed into his chest as fire trucks roared in, lights flashing red and blue. Neighbors stood in stunned silence, the glow of the flames painting their faces. And there, on the edge of the crowd, stood Karen. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She didn't even pretend to be shocked. She just watched. Cold, silent. Malik's eyes locked on hers, fury boiling through his veins. He knew. Everyone knew. But proving it? That was another story. Detectives swarmed the scene, taking notes, asking questions. Malik told them everything. The threats, the flyers, the harassment. "Do you have any proof she did this?" one officer asked, scribbling on his pad. Malik's jaw tightened. Proof. That was the problem. Karen was careful, calculated. But then, a voice spoke up. "I saw her," said a neighbor, the young wife from down the street. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "I saw Karen sneaking around the side of his house with a red can. I thought maybe she was up to her old spying, but now I know what she was doing." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's face drained of color. "That's a lie," she screeched. "You can't prove anything." Another neighbor chimed in. "I saw her car earlier, circling the block, twice, piece by piece." The story closed in. Officers turned to Karen. "Ma'am, we're going to need to ask you some questions." She backed up, shaking her head. No, I didn't. This is a setup." But as they led her toward the patrol car, Malik stood tall, holding Kayla's hand. His voice cut through the chaos, steady and strong. "You tried to take everything from me, but you can't burn away the truth." For the first time, Karen wasn't the one in control. She wasn't handing out fines or shouting at meetings. She was in handcuffs, her empire of fear collapsing around her. The neighborhood watched in silence as she was driven away. That night, Malik and Kayla stood in front of the smoldering remains of their home. The wall was blackened, the roof gone, but they were alive, and they weren't alone. Neighbors came forward with blankets, food, offers of shelter. One by one, they stood by Malik's side. It wasn't just his fight anymore. It was the community's stand against the tyranny that had ruled them for too long. And though the flames had destroyed his house, They had also burned away Karen's mask. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old paper, the kind of place where lives were reshaped with the slam of a gavel. Malik sat at the plaintiff's table, suit pressed but shoulders heavy. Beside him, his lawyer, Ms. Ramirez, tapped her pen with calm precision. Across the aisle, Karen perched like a hawk, her attorney whispering in her ear. The fire had been ruled arson. Investigators confirmed the gasoline traces. Witnesses came forward. Everything pointed to her. But Karen wasn't breaking. When the trial began, she leaned back in her chair, lips curled in a smug smile, as if she were the victim of some grand conspiracy. Her attorney stood first. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a witch hunt. My client, a respected HOA president, is being targeted because she enforced the rules fairly. Now, disgruntled neighbors are piling on lies, trying to destroy her life. But the evidence? The evidence tells a different story. He gestured toward Malik's side. What we have here is nothing more than anger, rumor, and mob mentality. Karen dabbed at fake tears with a tissue. Malik's fists clenched under the table. When Ms. Ramirez rose, her voice cut through the room like steel. Rumors? Lies? No, what we have is a community terrorized. A man's home burned to the ground, and a woman who thought she was untouchable. She turned to the jury, her tone sharp. You'll hear from multiple neighbors who saw her. You'll hear about her threats, her harassment, her obsession with controlling every detail of this neighborhood. The evidence will show you exactly who Karen is and why she must be held accountable. Witness after witness took the stand. Mrs. Patel described Karen slipping through Malik's yard at night. Mr. Williams told the jury about the years of threats. The young wife testified again, firm in her memory of Karen carrying a red gas can. Each testimony chipped away at Karen's wall of lies. But then came her turn. Karen rose with theatrical grace, her voice trembling. I loved that neighborhood. I dedicated years of my life to keeping it safe, clean, and beautiful. And this is how I'm repaid? With accusations? With lies? I never hurt anyone. I only wanted people to follow the rules. She turned toward the jury, eyes glistening. They're trying to destroy me because I demanded excellence. Because I wouldn't let standards slip. I lost my home too when that fire spread. I lost everything. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Malik's head snapped up. Lost her home? The woman was shameless. He wanted to stand and shout the truth, but Ms. Ramirez's hand on his arm held him steady. She's hanging herself, she whispered. The prosecution presented photographs. Karen's garage, intact and untouched by fire. The jury saw through the performance. Still, Karen didn't falter. In cross-examination, Miss Ramirez pounced. You claim you lost everything. Yet, isn't it true your home suffered no damage? Karen fumbled, her voice stammering. Well, emotionally, I mean. The whole community, it was traumatic. And isn't it also true that multiple neighbors saw you trespassing? That you had a history of targeting Mr. Malik specifically? Karen's mask cracked, her face tightening. They're lying. They all hate me because I did my job. Or, Miss Ramirez pressed. They're finally free to tell the truth now that you're no longer in power. The courtroom went silent. As the trial stretched on, Malik felt the weight of every moment. The system moved slowly, painfully. There were objections, recesses, and long hours where his life was dissected in public. Kayla sat in the back row, drawing pictures to distract herself. Every time Malik turned and saw her, his resolve hardened. He couldn't let Karen win. Not here. Not again. When closing arguments came, Ms. Ramirez delivered the final blow. Karen believed she could control this neighborhood. She believed she could scare, manipulate, and finally destroy the one man who stood up to her. But no one is above the law, not even an HOA president who thought she was queen. This case isn't just about arson. It's about justice. For Malik, for his daughter, for every neighbor who lived in fear. The words hung heavy in the air. The jury left to deliberate. Hours passed. Malik paced the hallway, nerves raw. Karen sat across the room, glaring at him with venom in her eyes, her fingers twitching as if she could strangle him from afar. Finally, the bailiff called them back in. The jury had reached a verdict. The room hushed. Malik held his breath, Kayla's small hand gripping his. The foreman stood. We, the jury, find the defendant. The courtroom was silent, so silent Malik could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above. His daughter Kayla clung to his hand, her little fingers trembling. At the defense table, Karen sat tall, lips pursed, as if the jury's decision was already written in her favor. Her attorney leaned back, arms folded, wearing a smug half smile. The jury foreman stood, paper trembling slightly in his hand. We, the jury, find the defendant. Every breath in the room froze. Guilty, gasps rippled through the gallery. Malik exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding for months. His knees nearly buckled with relief. He reached down and squeezed Kayla's hand. She looked up at him, wide-eyed, and whispered, "Daddy, does this mean it's over?" "Almost, baby, almost." Karen, however, didn't flinch. She tilted her head slowly, like a queen refusing to acknowledge defeat. Then, as the judge spoke, her composure cracked. "Karen Whitfield, you have been found guilty of arson, harassment, and reckless endangerment. You will be remanded into custody immediately while sentencing is scheduled." The bailiff approached. Karen's eyes widened, rage spilling over. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, yanking her arm away. "I built that neighborhood. Without me, it'll fall apart. You're all going to regret this." Her voice echoed through the chamber as the bailiff locked the cuffs around her wrists. The jury stared, stunned, as the mask finally shattered. For the first time, they saw the Karen that Malik and the neighbors had known all along, the tyrant behind the whole title. Malik stood slowly. He didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply watched as Karen was led away, thrashing, her face twisted with hate. She spat over her shoulder. "This isn't over, Malik. Do you hear me? I'll make you pay." Her shriek rang out until the heavy door slammed shut behind her. Silence returned. Neighbors who had once been too scared to speak now gathered around Malik, offering quiet words of support. Some hugged him. Others simply nodded, their eyes saying what words couldn't. "You did it. You finally stood up to her for all of us." "Ms." Ramirez placed a hand on his shoulder. "This was never just about you. It was about freeing a whole community from her grip. And today, you won." Malik nodded, though his heart was still heavy. Winning didn't bring his house back. It didn't erase the nights Kayla cried herself to sleep. But it was justice. At least some piece of it. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Microphones extended. "Malik, how do you feel now that the verdict is in? Do you think Karen will appeal? Are you satisfied with justice?" He shielded Kayla and pushed through. "No comment," he muttered. This wasn't a victory lap. This was survival. As they climbed into Ms. Ramirez's car, Malik looked back once more at the courthouse doors. Somewhere inside, Karen was still screaming. He knew her type. She'd never accept defeat quietly. That night, the neighborhood felt different. For the first time in years, it was quiet. No more constant hoe patrols. No more threatening letters in mailboxes. No more Karen. Neighbors gathered at Malik's temporary rental to celebrate. They brought food, drinks, and laughter. Things the community hadn't shared in too long. Children played in the yard, free from watchful, judging eyes. Someone raised a toast. To Malik, to Kayla, to freedom from Karen. Cheers erupted. Malik smiled faintly, but inside, unease still lingered. Later, after everyone left, Malik tucked Kayla into bed. She hugged him tightly. "Daddy, are we safe now?" He brushed her hair back. "Yes, baby. We're safe now." But as he lay awake in the dark, Malik couldn't shake the feeling. Karen's final words echoed in his head. "This isn't over, Malik. I'll make you pay." For weeks, life in the neighborhood seemed to slowly mend. Without Karen's iron grip, people began to breathe again. Kids rode their bikes without fear of fines. Families decorated their yards with flowers, lights, even bright paint, all the things Karen once banned. Malik, though, still carried scars. He and Kayla lived in a rental, saving every penny to rebuild their home. Sometimes, when he passed the blackened remains of their old house, he could still smell the smoke. But each day, he reminded himself, Karen was locked away. She couldn't hurt them anymore. Or so he thought. One morning, as Malik made breakfast, a loud thunk hit the front door. He frowned, stepping outside. On the porch lay an envelope. No postage, just his name scrawled across the front in jagged handwriting. His stomach dropped. He tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 4 words, written in red ink. I'm not finished yet. That night, Malik's phone buzzed. A restricted number. Against his better judgment, he answered. A voice, low and venomous, filled his ear. Did you really think prison could stop me? Karen hissed. I have friends. I have power. You ruined my life, Malik. Now I'll ruin yours. Before he could respond, the line went dead. Malik's blood ran cold. The next day, the news broke. Karen had escaped custody during a transfer to state prison. A decoy fight in the transport van, a distraction, and she slipped away into the chaos. The anchor's voice on TV was grave. Authorities urged residents of Oakwood to remain vigilant. The fugitive is considered dangerous. Kayla clutched her father's arm. Daddy, is she coming here? Malik pulled her close, heart pounding. Not if I can help it. For 3 nights, Malik barely slept. He checked every lock, every window, every shadow outside. The community rallied around him, offering protection. But everyone knew who Karen's target was. On the 4th night, it happened. It crashed downstairs, shattering glass. Malik shot out of bed, heart racing. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept by the door and rushed down the stairs. In the living room, the curtains billowed. The window was smashed. And there she was, Karen. Her prison jumpsuit torn, dirt smeared across her face. But her eyes burned with madness. You took everything from me, she shrieked, lunging forward with a shard of glass in her hand. Malik swung the bat. She ducked, the shard slicing across his arm. Pain seared, but adrenaline carried him. He shoved her back, his body shielding Kayla, who was crying at the top of the stairs. This ends tonight, Karen, he roared. Karen laughed, wild and unhinged. No, Malik, it only ends when you're gone. She lunged again. They struggled, the bat clattering across the floor. Karen clawed, screamed, bit, her strength fueled by obsession. Malik fought back with everything he had, the thought of Kayla's terrified face giving him strength. Finally, with a desperate surge, he grabbed Karen by the arm, twisted, and sent her crashing into the coffee table. The shard flew from her hand. She lay there, gasping, still trying to rise. But red and blue lights flashed outside. Police swarmed the house, guns drawn. Freeze! Karen thrashed against the officers, screaming like a banshee as they pinned her down. You can't win. I'll never stop. Do you hear me, Malik? Never. As they dragged her away for the last time, Malik stood trembling, chest heaving, blood dripping from his arm. Kayla ran into his arms, sobbing into his chest. It's okay, baby. It's over now. For real this time, he whispered, holding her tight. This time, he believed it. Months later, Malik and Kayla stood in front of a new house being built on the same lot where their old one had burned. Neighbors surrounded them, cheering, clapping, and helping raise the walls. It wasn't just a house. It was a symbol that no tyrant, no HOA dictator, no Karen could destroy them. As the sun set, Malik lifted Kayla into his arms. She smiled, for the first time in so long, without fear. They were free, finally free. And this time, no one could take that away.